Okay, let's kneel for prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for the time that we have once again this morning to study your word together. We need your spirit. We know, Lord, that there are many things that are hard to understand in your word, and we ask that it can be you that guides us and helps us to understand the significance of the things we're going to study today. We know that there are many dangers and snares that beset our feet, and we just ask, Lord, that you can keep us from those snares. We ask for forgiveness for our sins, and that we can have a desire to know what is true. Thank you, Lord, for each person and for this study. May your Holy Spirit be with each one. We ask this and pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, good morning, everyone. I did send out some links and some notes. The notes that I sent out are a reference. It's actually a PDF. You would have to go there and download it if you want the PDF. It's the book, The Seer of Patmos by Stephen Haskell. And it has some relevance to this study, but we're not going to necessarily directly use it today. We might use it tomorrow. I also have a quote from Ellen White, and which we're going to read. So it's in the email, and I bolded some of it in the email, which I know I can do on my Ellen White disc. I just haven't figured out how. And there's also a link to a program called the Stellarium. So it's an astronomy program, and we're going to look at that. It's just one of the tools that can be used. It's not the best astronomy program from the point of calendars, but it is from the best one that I know of from as far as a free program, from the visual aspects of the sky. So if you want to look at the sky, it's pretty hard to do nowadays with all the light pollution we have, unless you live in the country. And it's nice to be able to have, these access to these things. Okay, so, and somebody thanked me for sending the link to the Seer of Patmos. It is an extremely good book, actually. If you start reading through it, especially when you get to chapter 3, that is dealing with the messages to Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea, he goes through some of Millerite history in a very good way. So it's very brief, and it's a very good summary of Millerite history. Deals with August 11th, 1840. Obviously, it doesn't have as much detail as we have understanding, but if somebody wants to just get a quick view of Millerite history and how somebody at the turn of the century would have understood Adventism, Haskell is a good author to read. His book on Daniel the prophet is extremely good as well, and also his book on the sanctuary, which is entitled, what's his book on the sanctuary called? I can't think of the title of it right now. But anyway, he has a very good book on the sanctuary as well. So
the cross and its shadow.
Yeah, the cross and its shadow. Yes. So that is a very good book. If you want to study the sanctuary, read The Cross and Its Shadow. Thanks for that. So we're going to read the passages from Ezekiel that we're going to study here. So we're going to try to get through Ezekiel chapter 1 from verse 4 and onward. And so that's as big as I can get it on here. And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof, as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and every one had 4 faces, and every one had 4 wings. And their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot. And they sparkled like the color of burnished brass. And they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides. And they had 4 had their faces and their wings. And their wings were joined one to another, and they turned not when they went. And they went every one straight forward. And as for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man, and the face of a lion on the right side. And they had 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, and they 4 also had the face of an eagle. And thus were their faces, and their wings were stretched upward. 2 wings of every one were joined one to another, and 2 covered their bodies. And they went every one straight forward, whither the Spirit was to go, they went, and they turned not when they went. And as for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like the burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps. And it went up and down among the living creatures. And the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. Now, as I beheld the living creatures, behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures, with his 4 faces. And the appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of a beryl. And they 4 had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. When they went upon their 4 sides, and they turned not when they went. And as for their rings, they were so high that they were dreadful, and their rings were full of eyes round about them 4. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them. And when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. Whithersoever the Spirit was to go, they went. Thither was their spirit to go, and the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. And when those went, these went, and when those stood, these stood, and when those were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels. And the likeness of the firmament upon the heads of the living creatures was as the color of the terrible crystal stretched forth over their heads above. And under the firmament were their wings straight, the one toward the other. Every one had 2, which covered on this side, and every one had 2, which covered on that side, their bodies. And when they went, I heard the noise of their wings like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech, and as the noise of an host. And when they stood, they let down their wings. And there was a voice from the firmament that was over their heads when they stood, and had let down their wings. And above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, as the appearance of a sapphire stone. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness of the appearance of a man above upon it. And I saw as the color of amber, as the appearance of a fire round about within it. And the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downward. And I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and it had brightness round about. And the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell on my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. And I'm going to read the next chapter, at least part of it. Actually, I won't. Okay, we might get into some of that, so I won't read that. So it's just that God's going to speak to him after he sees this vision. So I remember reading this. I was 14 years old, and Now, I had read, of course, Ezekiel before that. I was always fascinated with Ezekiel. But I remember reading this when I was 14. And I was so fascinated by it. At the same time, I was actually studying the book of Revelation. So I was reading Ezekiel and I was reading Revelation. I don't think I studied the book of Daniel at that time, but I was reading Revelation. And I think I got into reading Ezekiel because I was reading Revelation and trying to understand it. And there must have been something in Revelation that directed me over to Ezekiel, to this vision. And I can't remember why. It might have been maybe just a reference in the book of Revelation that I was reading. Because I remember specifically reading Revelation chapter 1 and the vision that John has of Christ. And I think that might have directed me over to this. So anyway, when I was reading this and I started reading through Ezekiel, I mean, obviously I had no idea about this. And at the time, so when I was 14, it was 1977. And I know it was around that time that I had seen the movie, The Chariot of the Gods. So I don't know how many people have ever heard of the movie or have ever seen it. But at that time, it was a big thing. Now, the book Chariot of the Gods came out in 1972, I believe. I could be wrong on that. And I'm not sure when the movie came out. I think it was 75, but it could have been later. And of course, you know, in my mind at the time, and from the influences that were around me, this must have been some kind of spacecraft or something like that. You know, we have these fanciful ideas that when we're trying to look at this, what is it that he's actually seen and describing? And obviously I didn't have the background to understand what he was talking about. Now, we have, you know, in the present day, when we look at this, we have, of course, as Seventh-day Adventists, we have Ellen White's statements regarding these visions, both the one in Isaiah and the one in John, and also this one in Ezekiel. And so we have some insight that maybe other people don't have. But when we're going to look at this, we're going to try to understand this. And this might appear to be controversial on the surface as we start to go through this, but you'll see the purpose as we go through the book of Ezekiel, that what this is talking about and why this is here. It really has to do with the message of the book of Ezekiel in various ways. For one, you can't really understand Ezekiel chapter 8 if you don't understand Ezekiel chapter 1, what it is that he sees. And even there's lots in the Old Testament that we don't understand. And I think there's two reasons. I would think the first reason we don't understand some of the scriptures dealing with some of these phrases that we see in the Bible that have to do with the sky, with how the Israelites understood what was happening in the sky or in the heavens. One is we don't see the sky anymore, and we don't have a knowledge of it. We're not dependent upon it. Even if we could see it, we don't need it to keep time. We don't keep track of the seasons with the sky. And so we're very unfamiliar with it. Ever since man has had the Gregorian or the Julian calendars, we really haven't had a need for the sky as a calendar. And we're going to see that this actually relates to the sky, and we're going to see why and why God uses this. Of course, the other issue has to do with the idea of astrology. So we know astrology is bad, and we're going to see that here in the book of Ezekiel, that you'll actually see what is being attacked is that the Jews have taken up astrology. So the Jews are worshiping the sky and the stars and the gods that are associated with it. And these are a counterfeit of true worship. So God, of course, created the sky. He's created the sun and the moon and the stars, and they have a purpose. And so we're going to look at that. And so this, on the surface, somebody could take some of the things that I'm going to say and they could take them out of context. But I think the context is really clear that God is opposed to astrology and to fortune telling and to divination and all these different things. He's opposed to the worship of false gods. He's opposed to the making of graven images of these gods and bowing down and worshiping them and trying to appease them in some way or to placate them in some way to guide your destiny. And this is actually a contrast or a conflict that exists throughout scriptures, that because we're often unfamiliar with these terms and these languages, that when we have these biblical references to these things, we don't know what is being referenced. And in studying this out, I have a much better appreciation for what the false worship was that the Israelites got caught up in during the time of the kings of Judah and the kings of Israel. When they got into false worship, it really was astrology. Even though they're making idols, these idols are representing the gods that they see in the sky. So we're going to look at this, and we're gonna try to understand what Ezekiel is talking about and why this vision happens. Now, I'm going to refer you, basically tell you what the verses are that we're going to be studying. But basically, we're going to be studying Numbers 2, Ezekiel 1, and Revelation chapter 4. And these all relate to each other. And we could also put in Isaiah chapter 6. They all relate to each other. I wasn't really going to look at Isaiah 6 too much. Ellen White does reference it. And we're going to look at a non-biblical book, just for some information, called the Book of Enoch. And this gives us information about this, and it's chapter 72. So we're not using this as a biblical authority or any kind of authority, but it's just to give us some background information. Now, there are also some other links that I'll send you as well that give us some information. And I was trying to also find in this commentary, Keel and Delitzsch's commentary, and where he refers to this, and I just didn't have time to search it. But I'll try to search that. So this is Keel and Delitzsch's commentary, and I'm not sure where this would end up be, but I think it would be here. Yes, it's his commentary on Numbers chapter 2. So we're going to be able to look at that as well, because he's going to give us some information. So this is a little bit difficult of a study. I tried to figure out how to present it. I presented it to Heidi last night in a very 10 minutes presentation, just a general idea. And I thought about it in different ways. So we have this this passage, and we're going to look at it. And I'm just going to point out a number of things. And we'll see this when we look at these different passages. But we know we have these 4 living creatures. And the description or the translation that happens in the King James is not necessarily the best translation of this passage. That is, it makes it quite obscure, and it also translates, I believe, some of these incorrectly, some of these sentences, some of these verses. So, for instance, when we get to verse 6, and it says, everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings. So the translators have translated that each of these living creatures has 4 faces, and everyone has 4 wings. And so now these are, we know that there's some kind of angel. Okay, so that's the way we'd first look at them, and that they have these 4 wings. And we know there are different types of angels, and we don't know much about them. We know there's things called cherubim, and there's things called seraphim. And seraphim have 6 wings, and cherubim have 4 wings. That's how we generally understand it. And the cherubim have cloven hooves. So I'm not sure what the seraphim look like. We're going to see in John chapter 4, there's going to be seraphim that are being seen there. And then when we look at these things, so I'm not going to go through all these verses, in detail right away. We might be able to go through this. I'm not sure how much we can get done. But what we have is that we have these 4 creatures, and it says in verse 6, and everyone had 4 faces, everyone had 4 wings. Well, actually it should say, and each of the 4 had faces, and each of the 4 had wings. So it doesn't actually say that each had 4 faces and each has 4 wings. Or it could say every one of the 4 had faces and every one of the 4 had wings would actually be a better translation of it. Now, when it says their feet were straight, it's not necessarily talking about their feet. It's talking about the lower part of their legs. And the sole of their feet was like the sole of a calf's foot. So this is saying that they have calf's feet. So these are, they're like men, right? They have the likeness of a man. And then they have characteristics of animals. So this seems bizarre to us because we don't really think of angels as having characteristics of animals. So these are obviously certain types of beings that exist, and this is what Ezekiel sees in vision. And then they had the hands of a man under their wings on their 4 sides. So again, the way that they're translating this, and then it says they 4 had faces and their wings. That's actually closer to what verse 6 should say. They 4, or where it says everyone, or they 4 had faces, they 4 had wings. That's this part of verse 8 where it says they 4 had their faces and their wings. And we know that they had hands of a man under the wings. So that means they have arms. So to try to draw this creature, so I'm not, I used to be an artist, right? So you have this animal that has these legs, which are straight.
Change the screen.
Oh, thank you. So it's not going to be a great drawn animal here, and it's going to have a head, right? So there's different faces that they're all going to have, but they're going to have wings, and the wings are going to cover their sides and different parts of them. So we're going to look at that. So obviously they have wings. I'll just draw some wings here, like this. Now, often when you see these, you'll see the wings on their bodies like this. So you'll see the wings covering their bodies in diagrams of these things. And to say that they had 4 faces, I think is wrong. I think that they 4 had faces, so there's 4 faces. And we're going to see what those faces are that the different living creatures have. But they have these cloven feet, right? So they got the feet of an ox, but also they have arms. So probably the best way to draw this would be to draw like a body with, the person has arms coming out. And the wings then, you'd have some wings up here, like that. And so they have arms under their wings. And then, of course, you're going to have the different faces of these different beings. Now, one of them is going to have the face of a man, right? And terrible drawing, I know. But you will see types of drawings like this, where you have this body of an animal and parts of the body and part of the body of a man, and then you're going to have these different faces. And the different faces that you're going to see are, we're going to have a lion, we're going to have an eagle, we're going to have, one has the face of a man, and the other has the face of an ox. And And this could be translated a calf or a bull or something like that too. There's different ways that this can be translated and seen in different places. And these descriptions, it doesn't mean that they have 4 different faces. And I've seen some people depict them that, you know, they have like these 4 faces and 4 heads and different things like that. But my view is that they have 1 face, each of them. But there's 4 different faces for each of the 4 living creatures. Now, I have to erase this picture because it's so terrible, but so, you know, it's probably better I don't draw pictures until I practice some of these things. So let's take a look again at the passage. And there's some people who gave notes. Yes, Revelation 4, verse 7 to 8, we're going to look at. And Lance Collin, John Todd's statement that astrology is the basis of witchcraft. Yes. So astrology is extremely dangerous. So I don't want anybody to think that when we're studying this, that we're studying astrology, but we do need to look at the context in which this would be understood by Ezekiel and by the people in his day, what is actually being referred to. So they would see this as an attack on astrology. Now, it says their wings were joined together, one to another, and they turned not when they went, and they went everyone straight forward. So it's kind of hard to know what this means, because these wings are joined to each other, so they're somehow connected. And it says they turned not when they went, so they're obviously going to be moving, but they're not turning. So every one of them goes straight forward. And it's hard to say what that means. As for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man. Now it's going to say on the left side and the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, and they 4 also had the face of an eagle. And so the way that the translators have translated this, again, is it's a misunderstanding of the passage. So each of them do not have 4 faces. But when it talks about the left and the right, it's talking about directions. And the way that we're going to understand this is we're going to go to Numbers chapter 2. And in Numbers chapter 2, we're going to have the arrangement of the camp of Israel. Now, you're going to have this camp arranged in such a way that they're going to have these different tribes going together, and you're going to have the 4 directions of the compass being referred to. So I'm going to do it this way, I guess. So we're going to have this circle here. So this is the camp of Israel. So it's obviously probably more in a square, but I'm going to draw it here as a circle. And it's going to say, and on the east side toward the rising of the sun, they shall have the standard of the camp of Judah pitched throughout their armies. Now, so we're going to have the east side here, and we're going to have Judah. And I know if you have your scriptures there, I'm not going to be able to switch back and forth easily. So we'll leave that up there. And it's going to give the number of them and so forth. And those that pitch with him are going to be Issachar and the other one is Zebulun. So Issachar and Zebulun are going to be on that same side. So you're going to have over here, we'll just put Issachar and Zebulun. Okay. And on the south side shall be the standard of the camp of Reuben. So Reuben's going to be on the south. And so I guess I'll put it inside here, Reuben. And that's going to be the south. And then it's going to have, with Reuben, you're going to have Ephraim and Manasseh. So and then you're going to have Dan on the north, and Dan's going to be with Asher and Naphtali. So you can have Dan over here. And did I miss one? Ephraim, who's on the west? Well, I might have done this wrong. Okay, Reuben shall be Simeon and Gad. So I kind of skipped that. So yeah. There we go. And then you're going to have Ephraim and Manasseh. And then, of course, who's left over? It's going to be here on the west. So I still think I did something wrong. Okay. Yeah, let's go through this. I'm going to bring up the screen because I'm trying to skip through these verses. And so I'm not doing a very good job. I'm skipping over. I'm not good at skipping when I read.
Where's Benjamin?
Yeah, so there's going to be Benjamin. So let's just go through these here quickly. Yeah, because Benjamin needs to be somewhere. So I think I made a mistake here. Because we also have Levi. And so I'm not sure what I did because I'm not sure how that goes. Levi obviously doesn't end up in this list. So the only other one I have is Benjamin. But, okay, so you got Issachar and in verse 5 and Zebulun in verse 7. And they're going to be with Judah on the east. And then on the south side, you says that they have Reuben, according to their armies, and the hosts that were numbered there over 406. So they have, let me see. So Reuben, and it says Reuben has Simeon and Gad. And then it gives the number. So the Levites, it says in verse 17, and then the tabernacle of the congregation shall set forward with the camp of the Levites in the midst of the camp. So you're going to have the Levites in the middle. And on the west side shall be the standard of the camp of Ephraim. Okay, so I did a mistake there. So on the west side, you're going to have Ephraim. So you got Ephraim here. And the hosts that were numbered of them. So west side of the camp, standard of the camp of Ephraim, according to their armies. And by him, the tribe of Manasseh and the tribe of Benjamin. So that's what I did wrong. So there's Benjamin. Okay. So now we got them all in. So that's how it goes. Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin are on the west. Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun on the east. Reuben, Simeon, and Gad on the south. And Asher, Naphtali in the north. And you're going to have Levi in the center. They're going to be in the center of this, surrounding the tabernacle. So I guess what I could put here is I could put the tabernacle, and then you're going to have Levi all around the tabernacle. Let's look at it that way. There we go. Okay, so does that make sense to people? I've just got to go back to the screen or to the whiteboard. So when I do that, does that make sense based on these passages that we had? And I don't know how many people have done this before or thought about this before. Now, and I know that I had studied this a long time ago, and I don't know if it's in The Cross and its Shadow, or if it's in the Sea of Patmos, because I haven't read either of those books lately, other than looking at the PDF for Revelation chapter 4. But this idea of that there are, and I know it's in one of Haskell's books, but he deals with the different standards. So you have these standards or banners. And this is, I can give you this link here later on. So this is reference to Ezekiel chapter 1. And this guy, it says, according to rabbinic tradition. So this is a rabbinic tradition or understanding. The different leaders of the tribes had their own standards with the crests of their ancestors depicted upon them. I need to share the screen. I didn't do that. I did that wrong. Let's try this again. There we go. Okay, blow this up a bit more. And I'm hoping people are following this. I mean, I will pull it all together at as we get through this. So Jerome Prado in the commentary upon Ezekiel. And we also see this in, because he's going to reference this, so we're going to look at this as well. He references the commentary I was referring to, Keel. Okay, so the different leaders of the tribes had their own standards with the crests of their ancestors depicted upon them. On the east, above the tent of Naasson, the firstborn of Judah. So I'm not sure why he uses this word Naasson. Okay, that must be his name, the firstborn of Judah. So Judah, Naasson is the son, he's the firstborn of Judah. There shone a standard of a green color, this color having been adopted by him because it was a green stone, an emerald, that the name of his forefather Judah was engraved on the breastplate of the high priest. And on this standard there was depicted a lion. And of course, I'm not going to deal with the stone so much, but we know Judah is a lion. Right, so that's pretty straightforward in understanding that from the scriptures. Now, towards the south, above the tent of Elisur, the son of Reuben, there floated a red standard, having the color of a sardis, on which was the name of his father Reuben, was engraved upon the breastplate of the high priest. The symbol depicted upon his standard was a human head. So Reuben, the symbol here, is a man. And then when we go to the next one, the son of Ephraim, which is a golden flag, we have a head of a calf or an ox. So there's the ox that's being depicted. Calves are oxen that his ancestor Joseph had predicted and provided for the famine. So they're using biblical reasons of why they're using these descriptions. And then on the standard of Ephraim resembled that of the chrysolite, and so that's on Ephraim towards the north, above the tent of Ahazer, the son of Dan. Obviously, we know what's going to be coming next. This is going to be, at least what we would think it would be. We would think this is going to be the eagle. Now here it says it's a serpent, I believe. So so this is one of the views that is understood. That this is going to be a serpent here. So we would expect, based upon this idea, that there's some similarities to what we see happening in that vision in Ezekiel. Now, some people say it's an eagle. So I put the serpent there, but I also put the eagle there. So it's just that here they say it's the eagle. So in relation to the eagle being associated with the tribe of Dan,
Switch the screen.
a judge. What's that?
You switch the screen.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so there's the screen. So we got, there you can see I have the eagle and the serpent up there with Dan, but we have these other representations. Now, I'm going to look at the commentary. So
just as a question,
okay.
Have you ever considered in this layout that those to the west are all of the tribes that came through Raquel? Those to the north are a mix from the handmaidens. Those to the east are all Leah, and the ones that are to the south are a mix of from Leah and the handmaiden.
Yes, the other people notice this. Okay, so yeah, because these are Leah's children, Zebulun, Issachar, and Judah, correct?
Right.
And these are Rachel's children.
Right.
These are a mix of the handmaid's children. Yeah. So that is noted by other people. I'd sort of forgotten about that, but I remember reading that other places. So we have this depiction here. Now, he's going to comment on this. So when you go to Keel and Dilich's commentary, which I have on my e-sword, and I'm just gonna, they're gonna have basically what I just read is there. This is from Jerome Prado. Now, other people will put, instead of the serpent, they will put as I said, the eagle with Dan. Now, when we looked at Ezekiel, we saw all these. We saw the lion, the man, the ox, and the eagle being represented in these four living creatures. And now it talks about, so let's go back there. And I've never presented this before. I know I'm not doing the clearest, most straightforward job of it, sort of jumping around a bit. But it's kind of what we have to do for a study, right? That's just the nature of this type of study. Be way easier if you guys were here to do a study like this. So any comments you have are very welcome. Now, in Ezekiel chapter 1, we have these wings. So I'm taking the position that there isn't four faces. And it says here, So in Ezekiel 1 verse 10, as for the likeness of their faces, they four had a face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side, and they four had the face of an ox on the left side, and they four had the face of an eagle. And so the way that people picture this is as if they got these two faces on the left side of their face, of their head, and then they have this other face on the right side, and then it says they all have a face of an eagle. And so different people have tried to picture what this would mean visually. But I would think what's actually being talked about has to do with the directions of these four creatures and the way that they're laid out and the way that where they're placed. So when it says, for the likeness of their faces, for they four had the face of a man and the face of a lion, that's on the right side of this of where he is. So on the right side of where he's looking, he's seeing that there's one that has the face of a lion and one that has the face of a man. Not on the right side of their head, but on the right side. And then he says on the left side, there's going to be the face of one of these creatures has the face of an ox. And then it says also they had the face of an eagle. So when it says this in this translation, the way that you would read this is you would think that when it says they four also had the face of an eagle, it's not saying that all four of them had the face of an eagle. It's just saying that of those four, and it's hard to go. I'm not going to go into the Hebrew right now and try to parse this out, but different people translate this differently. And the way that the King James translators had chosen to translate it had to do with how they were interpreting what it was. It's not easy to translate this. It's not easy to translate Hebrew or any language if you don't understand what's being talked about. And once you start making a mistake, then you're going to continue on with that mistake. Now, and I'm not adamant about this. I'm just saying that as I've looked this up and read other places, the argument is that these don't all have four faces on each of them. And it doesn't really make sense. Now, one of the ways we can look at this is we're going to go to Revelation chapter 4. So we'll bring this up now. And this was mentioned by Angela earlier. So in Revelation chapter 4, we have a scene of the holy place of the heavenly sanctuary, where Christ is beginning his work in the holy place. And I did a little bit of a study on this on Friday. By a little bit of a study, I mean that quite literally. It wasn't much of a study on Revelation chapter 4, but it was a study on it. And we dealt mostly with this book that was open in the hand of the one seated upon the throne that could not be opened by the one seated upon the throne or anyone else, but the Lamb that was slain could open that book. And that book had the 7 seals. And we know that that's Christ, and it's his cross that unseals that book. And so there's a whole bunch there that I could have dealt with and that I could even deal with now, but we're not going to be able to get into that. But we know that there's these, so we'll just start here from the beginning. Looked and behold, a door was opened in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, come up hither, and I will show these things which must be hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald. And round about the throne were 24 seats. And upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white raiment, and they had on their heads crowns of gold. And out of the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices. And there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal, So remember, we saw this in Ezekiel too. So this is similar, but there are differences. And it talks about this terrible crystal that was there. So there's this sea of glass like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind. So there's 4 creatures just like we saw in Ezekiel chapter 1. But here it says they're full of eyes. Now it does sort of talk about that in Ezekiel chapter 1 as well. And the first beast was like a lion. The second was like a calf. The third had the beast had the face of a man. And the fourth beast was like a flying eagle. So you see the same descriptions of the faces. But here you don't see that each has all 4 faces. So you see that each one has its own face. And the 4 beasts, each of them had 6 wings about him, and they were full of eyes within. And they rest not day and night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, which was and is to come. So that's basically what we're going to deal with here. So we know we have the same sort of scene. Now, one of the things that when we deal with this passage in Revelation 4, this is going to deal with these 7 seals, right? So it's going to have this scroll, and you're going to have this scroll that's sealed with 7 seals in chapter 5. You see that this one seated upon the throne, which I say is Christ. He's the one, according to Spirit of Prophecy, who has this book, and we dealt with the book when we studied that on Friday. And then we're going to talk about these 7 seals. And so you're going to have the first few seals opened up, and the 3rd seal, the 4th seal, the 5th seal, and then you're going to have the 6th seal in Revelation 6. But the 7th seal isn't going to be opened up. In chapter 7, you're going to have the tribes of Israel being sealed. And so there's an obvious reference here to the number of, when you look at Numbers chapter 2, and they divide the camp and they number them, right? They tell you how many. In this case, you're going to have the 144,000, and there's going to be 12,000 from each tribe. So, and there's some differences here. So this is a huge study dealing with Revelation 7. And some of these things I've touched on other places. One is you'll see that Dan isn't included in these 12 tribes, and that Levi is included as one of the 12 tribes. And sometimes people will just say, well, Joseph is mentioned in here, right? Because in this one you have Judah, Reuben, and Gad. So again, you're going to have Judah in this case, but it's going to go Judah, Reuben, and Gad. So it's going to deal with these other ones. So it's not going to be in the same grouping. And then tribe of Asher, Naphtali, and Manasseh, and then Simeon, Levi, and Issachar. And then you're going to get Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. And so some people have said, well, we have Dan is taken out, and then they will say that Joseph is the one replacing him. Or they'll say, so I've seen different things, or Manasseh replaces him or something like that. But actually Levi is replacing Dan, because Joseph is just Ephraim and Manasseh is one of the tribes. So the one that's replacing Dan in Revelation 7 is Levi, because Levi is scattered among the tribes, but here he's one of the 12 tribes. And technically, even though there's 12 sons of Jacob, we know that Levi is taken out. There's actually 13 tribes. So when we say there's 12 tribes here, Dan is the one that's left out in this case. And that's because he's a backbiter, right? So he's a talebearer. He nips at the heels. And so he's taken out for that reason. Any questions on this so far? Because I hope I'm not going too fast, and I hope people are following this. And I know that, you know, there's people obviously who are going to be watching the videos later, whether they can, you know, they can't actually comment, they can ask questions on YouTube. But is this kind of making sense? Are people unfamiliar with this, or is this something that people are familiar with? Okay, so I'm going to assume people are familiar with it. They're understanding what I'm doing. I know I have some, I can always read some of the notes that people put here.
Okay, as a question.
Okay.
What you were just going through, I understand the situation as far as Dan, because Dan is being removed. And then you're saying Joseph being the equivalent of Ephraim, but Joseph had not been mentioned in the other tribes because he was given the double portion with Ephraim and Manasseh.
Right.
So is it not fair to state that Dan and Ephraim were removed because of their idolatry?
Well, yeah, so that's what some people will say, though the thing is Joseph is Ephraim. So Joseph is just another name for Ephraim. So, you know, I have a hard time saying that Ephraim's removed. His name is removed, so maybe in that sense. But Ephraim is often referred to as the tribe of Joseph, and we see that in Ezekiel Chapter 37, when you're dealing with the two sticks. And I'll just go there really quickly. Okay, I'm going there very slowly. Here it is. But in Ezekiel chapter 37, in this section dealing with the joining of the two sticks, and it says, right up on one for Judah, on the other for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim. So Joseph and the stick of Ephraim are the same thing. So that's all I'm saying. But yeah, it could be his name is removed and replaced with Joseph because of the idolatry. And that's definitely a possibility.
I think it connects to the two idols, the two calves that were set up in Dan and Bethel.
Yeah.
So I would connect it to that. And
right.
I understand Ephraim is there in Joseph, but it's in the sense it's doing as much as possible to exclude it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's so Dan there was the two golden calves. One was in Dan, which is in the north. The other one was Bethel, and Bethel is in the tribe of Ephraim. So where also you have Samaria as well as in the tribe of Ephraim. So Stephen there is referring to the fact that that's the false worship is centered in those two places. So I would agree. We're taking out the tribe of Ephraim as a name, but Joseph is Ephraim. So, but it's probably distancing themselves from that by putting it as the tribe of Joseph. Now,
I also come back to the one verse, to let Ephraim alone, for he is joined to his idols.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good reference as well. So Ephraim is joined to his idols, and Dan, of course, the aspect of him being a backbiter is another level, because Dan is a judge, and we know that deals with the civil authority when we deal with the two horns aspects of northern Israel. So you got Bethel, which is the house of God, that's what that means, and then Dan in the north, that's a judge. So Dan is a judge, but he's also a backbiter. He's a critic of his brethren, and so that's why he's taken out, as well as the golden calves. So that would be another way of looking at it. Now, I want to go to this other passage, so I'm going to have to bring this up. From Enoch. So, and again, I don't want to be misunderstood about this, because I'm not endorsing the book of Enoch as scripture. But I'm also, we do know that whatever the book of Enoch is, what we have now, we have the Ethiopic and Latin and a Greek translation of it. But in the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found an Aramaic version of Enoch. Now, it's just fragmentary. So I think it's about 30% of what you have in the present day book of Enoch, they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls in Aramaic. And it's an old book. Now, when it was written, nobody knows for certain. We definitely don't think Enoch wrote it. So it would be a deuterocanonical book. That is, it's falsely named. So it's not, Enoch did not write it, but it says that it's attributed to Enoch. And what they're going to do here in chapter 72 of Enoch is there's going to be this reference to the book of the courses of the luminaries of heaven. So this is talking about the sky. And again, I did my share wrong. I have to click on that. You just keep seeing my camping pictures. Okay. So the book of the courses of the luminaries of heaven, you might not be able to see this too well. I'm going to zoom in a bit. The relations of each, according to their classes, their dominion, and their seasons, according to their names and places of origin, according to their months, which Uriel, the holy angel who was with me, who is their guide, showed me. And he showed me all their laws exactly as they are, and how it is with regard to all the years of the world and unto eternity, till the new creation is accomplished, which dureth till eternity. So what Enoch is saying here is he's being shown the paths of the sun and the moon and the stars in the heavens and how they are going to be for all the years of the world unto eternity. So basically he says he's been shown the NASA website where it has all of the astronomical data of all the eclipses and of the moon and the sun, and you can, or he's being shown stellarium program, and he's shown all of this. So he's being shown something that we now have actually access to, but back then they wouldn't have they could try to calculate this out, and now this becomes part of astrology. So when we look at astrology and we think about astrology, and we know the horoscopes that are in the newspapers, but this is much different. Astrology is actually more involved. It's involved with all of their worship of their various gods, because their gods are in the sky. And we know sun worship. There's different ways in which the sun could be represented. One is he could be represented as a golden calf, right? So when you're worshiping these false gods, you're going to represent them in different ways based upon the constellations and how you interpret those constellations, what kind of creatures they are. And we're going to look at that a little bit. Now it says, and this is the first law of the luminaries. The luminary of the sun has its rising in the eastern portals of the heaven. Now, older translations of this is Charles's translation, would have gates of the heavens, right? Or the gate of heaven, gates of the heaven, and is setting in the western portions of the heaven, or portals, pardon me. And I saw 6 portals in which the sun rises, and 6 portals in which the sun sets. And the moon rises and sets in these portals, and the leaders of the stars and those whom they lead, 6 in the east and 6 in the west, and all following each other in accurately corresponding order. Also many windows to the right and the left of these portals. Now, we haven't got to Ellen White's quote, but we're going to get there, because what she says regarding Ezekiel is extremely important, and we're running out of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a program here. Now this is a stellarium, and this Stellarium program, this is the one I downloaded onto my computer. You can also look at the online version of it. I'm just going to put the land in here, and I'm going to put it on play, move it fast forward a bit. And you can see that this is going to move through the sky, and you're going to see the constellations there. You might not be able to read the names of them. It's a little bit tiny probably on your screen, depending on the device you're looking at. And there we see the sunrise. Now this here, I need to stop this. So what we're looking at here is around the time Jesus was born. And you'll notice that there's this constellation, if you can see it, of a woman, and that's called Virgo. It's the Virgin. And at the time Jesus was born, the sun and that constellation rise together. Now, we don't think about this because of where we live and the time that we live in, but the sun passes through or travels through these constellations. But of course, every single constellation that we can look at in the sky, the sun doesn't travel through it, and neither does the moon. But there's this area in the sky that the sun and the moon pass, or appear to pass, if you're just looking at it from the ground. And you would see that at different times of the year, you'll see a constellation, and that constellation will rise in the morning. And when it rises in the morning, then the sun will come with it. And when the sun comes with that constellation, it clothes it, right? And that would be, the idea is that when you're born, if you're born at the time of that constellation, then you're going to have that star sign. So this is the idea that we commonly have of this idea of a horoscope. It has to do with when you're born, where was the sun when it rose in the morning, what constellation was it in? So, if the sun was in Leo, you can see Leo here, up above the Virgin, then you would be born in the sign of Leo, right? So that's how that would work. And these are supposed to determine your destiny in some way. Now, it was much more involved in Babylon, where they believe that this originated, though I would say it goes further back. But, from modern archaeology, they can trace it back at least to Babylon. But we know that the ancient Israelites had some conception of the sky, and obviously they didn't worship the sky, at least, well, they did, but they weren't supposed to. But the time when Jesus is born is this time of the year. This is, I think, September 23rd, 4 BC. And you can see that the woman is clothed with the sun, and the moon is under her feet, right? So the moon is down here, and there's the sun. And that's because at this time of year, that's where the moon would be. Now, so this would be a little bit after the beginning of, let me see, this is just before the Tishri 1, I believe. I have to go look this up. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on this. But what I want you to see and understand is that there are these different constellations. And the four main constellations are the ox, the eagle, the lion, and the man, right? So, now not in our constellations that we have today, and they've had different names at different times. But these constellations, these directions that you see, have to do with the sky, and it has to do with the timepiece. And we're going to study this a little bit more tomorrow. Maybe, we're not going to get through, we'll try to finish off chapter 1 tomorrow. I don't think we're going to get to chapter 2. But I want you to look at this, and we're going to read Ellen White's quotes. And we're going to see that all of this really relates to Ezekiel. One of the aspects that it relates to in Ezekiel that you will see is the false worship that happens in Ezekiel chapter 8. And we read these things and we know that, obviously when they bow down and they worship the rising sun, and, we know women weeping for Tammuz, that's not good. That's probably something to do with Easter, right? So we know that there is this there's things happening that Ezekiel sees in vision. But when he talks about some of these things, it's actually a reference to astrology. And yet astrology is a counterfeit of something. God is the one who created the sun and the moon and the stars. And he's the one who's in control of human history. And we're going to see how this relates to the little book in John chapter 4 and 5. And so I'm going to try to tie these all together tomorrow. But I still want you to know where we're going. So in order to do that, we're going to go to this statement here in the Spirit of Prophecy, which I think is just here. Yeah, so in my email. So I sent this to everyone, but I'm going to have to zoom in, make it bigger. Okay, and I'll share it. Okay. And again, I keep doing that. Click on it. There we go. And make it a bit bigger still. So I hope people can sort of see where I'm going with this, that we're trying to understand the context of Ezekiel. So this is from 5 Testimonies, chapter 91, God's care for his work. And she starts with Isaiah. And so Isaiah is going to have this vision that's going to basically bring a conversion process to happen with him. So he's already started his prophesying. And she says that the youthful prophet had been called to bear to them a message of warning. And he knew that he would meet with obstinate resistance. He trembled as he viewed himself and thought of the stubbornness and unbelief of the people for whom he was to labor. His task seemed to him almost hopeless. Should he, in despair, relinquish his mission and leave Israel undisturbed to their idolatry? Were the gods of Nineveh to rule the earth in defiance of the God of heaven? So here we see something that's just quite insightful in what Ellen White's talking about in this context, as you're going to see as we read through. That she's really talking about us, and she's really talking to us. So we know that, this movement turned 30 in 2019. So we're a youthful priest or prophet. And now we have this task before us, and we could give up in hope. And you can see the gods of Nineveh, so that's the Assyrian gods, to rule the earth in defiance of the God of heaven. So there's the God of heaven who created everything, and then there's the gods of Nineveh, which are the things of nature that are being worshipped. Such thoughts as these were crowding upon his mind as he stood under the portico of the holy temple. Suddenly, the gate of the inner veil of the temple seemed to be uplifted or withdrawn, and he was permitted to gaze within upon the Holy of Holies, where even the prophet's feet might not enter. There rose up before him a vision of Jehovah, sitting upon a throne high and lifted up, while his train filled the temple. On each side of the throne hovered the seraphim, 2 wings bearing them up, 2 veiling their faces in adoration, and 2 covering their feet. These angel ministers lifted up their voices in solemn invocation. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. So we saw this same vision in John chapter 4. Never before had Isaiah realized so fully the greatness of Jehovah or his perfect holiness. And he felt that in his human frailty and unworthiness, he must perish in that divine presence. Woe is me, he cried, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. But a seraph came to him to fit him for his great mission. A living coal from the altar was laid upon his lips with the words, Lo, this hath touched thy lips, and thine iniquity is taken away, and thy sin purged. And when the voice of God was heard, saying, Whom shall I send? And who will go for us? Isaiah, with holy confidence, responded, Here I am, send me. So we can see that this is an experience that Isaiah goes through, and he sees the contrast between the gods of this world and the God of heaven. And he sees into the sanctuary, and he sees something that undoes him, that fits him for work and gives him strength and encouragement to accomplish that task. So Ezekiel, the mourning exile prophet, so now she's going to reference Ezekiel, in the land of the Chaldeans was given a vision teaching the same lesson of faith in the mighty God of Israel. So that's one of the things we get from Ezekiel chapter 1, is that this is a vision teaching the same lesson of faith in God. Now, in the context of Ezekiel, you'll see as we start to go through it, that he's a prophet who has time prophecies, and that these visions, and that's what I'm going to try to show tomorrow, and I want people to study these things and look at some of these things. So I'm going to give you some links to look at. But we can see that Ezekiel is shown that God is in control of things, and the sky is not in control of things. That is, he's given a sign of the zodiac, the sky, right? So we could call it the zodiac, but the zodiac is just, I can't remember what the word zodiac means, but it's just the path of the ecliptic where the sun passes through these different constellations. That's what the zodiac is, and there's 12 constellations. And it's the Babylonians that gave us that division of the sky, that there's 30 degrees for each of these 12 constellations. And of course, 30 times 12 is 360. So the sky is divided to 360 degrees. That comes from Babylon. So it has to do with their belief in magic of numbers, and also their belief that what they see in the sky are representations of their gods. So we need to be aware of that as we go through Ezekiel. Now, what we see here, as he was upon the banks of the river Kibar, a whirlwind seemed to come from the north, a great cloud and a fire enfolding itself, and a brightness was round about it, in the color of amber. A number of wheels of strange appearance, intersecting one another, were moved by 4 living creatures. High above all these was the likeness of the throne as the appearance of a sapphire stone, and upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness as the appearance of a man above upon it. So we're going to have these 4 living creatures, and she says there appeared in the cherubims of the form of a man's hand under their wings. So here she calls them cherubim. So, you know, they're probably a 4-winged creature. So they're different than the seraphim, or maybe there's something that we don't understand here, that are in John and that are in Isaiah. In Ezekiel, she calls them cherubim, not seraphim. And then there's these wheels, and these wheels intersect each other. Now, when we deal with, and we're going to look at this tomorrow, at least a little bit more, yeah, zodiac means a cycle or circle of little animals. That's what it is. So these are the animals that are passing through the sky, the constellations. Now, so there's this wheels within wheels, and this arrangement is so complicated that at first sight they appeared to Ezekiel to be all in confusion. But when they moved, it was with beautiful exactness and perfect harmony. And we have applied this to our lines and to the chronology that God has given us. That when people look at it, it's in confusion. It appears in confusion. People say it's too hard to understand, but we have seen that we have been able to understand these things. Now, in trying to understand chronology, what we need to understand in this context, and we will see this tomorrow, I'm going to try to go through it and make it clearer than I'm making it right now, but I just want to tell you how I understand it, is that calendars are representations of the sky. And there's different types of calendars: solar calendars, lunar calendars, lunisolar calendars, day count calendars, different types of calendars based upon observation of different things, like the Egyptian calendar based upon the rising of Sirius, which is a star. So they use the star to start their year, and it's in connection with the flooding of the Nile. So all of these calendars, they have a pagan origin. That is, there's a connection between calendars and the worship of false gods. So the question is, why are we using calendars? Well, because God also has a calendar, and he uses these pagan calendars as a witness, because God is in control. They are not in control. God is in control of everything. And so even though these pagan calendars exist, they're going to witness to the fact that God is in control of those calendars, and that those gods that they worship, those false gods, are not in control of those calendars. And this is one of the things that I've tried to explain to people in the context of, why do we use the Mayan calendar? Well, the Mayan calendar is a pagan calendar. Why are you using it? I say, I'm not using it. God is using it. And God shows us that he's using it. It wasn't me who decided I'm going to use the Mayan calendar. God directed that based upon the information that's in that calendar. And he does the same thing with the Gregorian calendar. He does the same thing with the Julian calendar. We all, as Seventh-day Adventists, know that 70 AD is symbolic. That's a pagan Roman calendar. That 70 AD is not based upon God's word. It's not the 70th year from when Jesus was born. It's the papacy, or the later Catholics and Christians came up with that count. But also we have different dates that have symbolic significance, but even just dates that we use, when we use July 27th, 1299 for the start of the 5 months of Josiah Litch's prophecy. We can use the biblical calendar. We can see it overrides that. But he just used, a Roman calendar. So we can see here that God's in control. And I do want you to read over this whole email of Ellen White's statement in 5 Testimonies. Because I just don't have time to cover the whole thing. We just got a few minutes left. And there's tons of things in here. Okay, so let's go ahead here. She even says about Ezekiel, this vision was given to Ezekiel at a time when his mind was filled with gloomy forebodings. He saw the land of his fathers lying desolate. The city that was once full of people was no longer inhabited. The voice of mirth and the song of praise were no more heard within her walls. The prophet himself was a stranger in a strange land, where boundless ambition and savage cruelty reigned supreme. That which he saw and heard of human tyranny and wrong distressed his soul, and he mourned bitterly day and night. But the wonderful symbols presented before him beside the river Kibar revealed an overruling power mightier than that of earthly rulers. Above the proud and cruel monarchs of Assyria and Babylon, the God of mercy and truth was enthroned. The wheel-like complications that appeared to the prophet to be involved in such confusion were under the guidance of an infinite hand. The Spirit of God, revealed to him as moving and directing these wheels, brought harmony out of confusion. So the whole world was under his control. Myriads of glorified beings were ready to, at his word, to overrule the power and policy of Donald Trump and Joe Biden and the Democrats and the Republicans and all the kingdoms of this world, evil men, and bring good to his faithful ones. And this is what we see. And then she's going to go through John, and she's going to describe some things there. And then she says, we are standing on the threshold of great and solemn events. Prophecy is fast fulfilling. The Lord is at the door, and there is soon to open before us a period of overwhelming interest to all living. I think we are in that time. The controversies of the past are to be revived. New controversies will arise. The scenes to be enacted in our world are not yet even dreamed of. Satan is at work through human agencies. Those who are making an effort to change the Constitution and secure a law enforcing Sunday observance little realize what will be the result. A crisis is just upon us. but God's servants are not to trust to themselves in this great emergency. In the visions given to Isaiah, to Ezekiel, and to John, we see how closely heaven is connected with the events taking place upon the earth, and how great is the care of God for those who are loyal to him. The world is not without a ruler. The program of coming events is in the hands of the Lord. The majesty of heaven has the destiny of nations, as well as the concerns of his church, in his own charge. So this to me is extremely powerful. I want you to read these passages. And in the time that we're living in, we can see that the vision given to Ezekiel is about time. It's about the sky. It's about the calendars. And it's about how God is in control. And one of the things that we see in Ezekiel is this time prophecy that we're going to eventually get to, the 390 years and the 40 years, but also the timing of the destruction of Jerusalem in both 586 and 70 AD, and the connection of the year-day principle, and then all of the symbolism that is going to be used when he's giving these judgments and he's addressing their gods. It's all about how God is in control, and why Ezekiel dates his visions is relevant to that issue. So, any final comments on these things? I know we had some good discussion a little bit, but and hopefully tomorrow we can have a bit more discussion as you start studying some of these things and thinking about them. I'm hoping that people will have some insights into what I presented here today. Any thoughts?
Man has put their own luminaries into the heavens today. These false gods that collect their information.
Yeah, and see, man believes that they're in control of things. And you bring up a good point. It's not just the satellites, but we have all these journeys to the moon and all these missions to Mars and out beyond into the stars. And man feels that he's in control. You know, that we're very intelligent. You know, we have this world of science, and we have our telescopes fixed upon these things that people thought once were gods, and to us they're just pieces of dust and matter and energy and light, and so we feel that we have control of them. But God is the one who made those things, and so even though our idolatry has changed in its outward characteristics to some degree, it's still really the same idolatry. It's this idea that we have control, and the pagans believed that they, in a sense, were controlling their gods. They had to act in a certain way and appease them. So it's really not much different nowadays. We name them, you know, global warming and Mother Nature and all these different things that we're doing to try to control our destiny. We have vaccinations. We think that somehow we could live forever if we just had enough science and technology. So it really hasn't changed, is my view. So again, any questions anyone has, Theodore James Turner at gmail.com. You can ask questions. Also, if you're watching the YouTube videos, you can comment on the videos themselves. You know, obviously those I will comment and I'll address questions that are asked there, and I can address them also in the videos. Even if I address them there, I can address them if it's an important question. Any questions or comments here now before we close with prayer?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Okay.
Okay, so the constellations originally, when God created,
Yeah,
he created the constellations, and it told the story of the gospel in the stars.
right. Yes.
And then after the flood, things changed.
The constellations did not change.
No, because the earth got tilted during
No,
the flood.
no, it
Yeah.
didn't. No,
I don't know about that. So
I do. Yeah, the earth did not change, because in order for God's clock to be true, it cannot have changed. And I know that's a bit of a controversial topic, because there's a lot of people who believe that during the flood, that's when the earth began to tilt and so forth. but we know it talks about seasons even before the flood. And the other thing is we also have the fact that when he created them, it says in Genesis chapter 1 that he made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So when God made this, he set this clock in the heavens. And if that clock has changed, then God's plans have changed. And also I dealt with the flood, the chronology of the flood, and shows that chronology is based upon the same sky that we have now. So we can actually, and there's a whole bunch of witnesses to that. So I understand that point, because I used to have the same position, that at the time of the flood, we went from a 360-day year with a 30-day month, and then, something happened, an asteroid hit the earth or something that caused the earth to go out of its orbit, changed the speed of its orbit. But we see we have a perfect system. The moon, one side is always facing the earth. It's the same apparent size in the sky as the sun. There's obviously been a few slight changes over time, because we know that the moon gets farther away from the earth, but nothing that affects God's time clock in any significant fashion. And so I believe that the clock was set up at the beginning, and that the flood, if you have the flood try to change that clock, it changes everything, and you wouldn't have the system exist if by some accident like an asteroid hitting the earth. So I've dealt with the mathematics of that other places. But anyway, thanks for that comment, and I don't mean to say you're wrong.
Yeah, I know.
But you understand what I'm saying. There's not a lot of time, but I do have a paper called Understanding the Calendars, which you can get at Academia, my Academia page. And I go through this in great detail and address the issue of what happened at the flood regarding the sky. And I just think that these are views that a lot of these things that we sort of believe are just remnants of ideas that came from other places. And we accept them because they make sense to us. But upon examination, I don't think there's biblical support for that view. So, and that's why, I said it's wrong, but I don't say to somebody they're wrong, or that the idea is wrong that they said. Okay, so I apologize for that. So anyway, let's close with prayer. I'm going a little bit over time. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for this study. We know that there's much we don't understand. But we ask, Lord, that your Holy Spirit can continue to guide and lead us in our study. I pray that you can give us all an open heart and mind, myself as well, to be corrected. I know that sometimes I think I know things that I don't know, and that's just for the simple reason I think I've studied them all out, but you've corrected me so many times. And if there's some things that I'm teaching that are wrong, I need to be corrected by you, and you use human instrumentalities to correct us. So I'm thankful for all the people involved in this study, that we can all study these things together, but also on our own, that we can seek you individually, and that the light that you give each person can be brought together in harmony in understanding these truths. I know, Lord, that there's things in Ezekiel that are hard to understand. We didn't really cover this as well as I would have liked, but I know that you have led in this study. Continue to lead tomorrow as we continue to look at Ezekiel chapter 1. Thank you for hearing our prayer. Thank you for each person, either participating or watching, and help us, Lord, to reveal your character. Help us to be encouraged and to be an encouragement to others. We know you are coming soon, and that Christ is going to return to this earth and make it new. And so we just ask that this can happen and that we can have a part to play in showing your glory to the world, to the earth. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.